Cass has been married 30 years to her husband Arnold, who is an economist with the U.S. Department of Commerce. She has 2 daughters. One is married and lives in the D.C. area, and one will be a senior at Johns Hopkins University. Mrs. Cass has been at Marshall for 5 years as the social studies chair. She teaches Ivy History of the Americas and Ivy's 20th century topics. Some of our favorites. She's also the sponsor of Marshall Kids Academic.
Thank you. Seniors, parents, families, and friends, I was both surprised and honored to be asked to speak to you this afternoon. Besides celebrating our seniors' baccalaureate, today is Father's Day. How appropriate that on a day we congratulate our students who have successfully completed their high school careers, that we take time to also honor the men who played an integral part in that success, dads. Without their love, support, and untiring help, it would have been a bumpy road indeed to reach graduation. My father and the other fathers of his generation were men who understood values. My father lived through the Roaring '20s and the Great Depression. He watched his own father and mother, both immigrants from Poland, help other family members get to this country before Hitler could march them off to the concentration camps of Europe. He fought proudly in World War II, came home, and worked hard to provide a good home for my mother, my sister, and me. Although he had secretly dreamed of going to college, there had been no money, and his father expected him to work in the family garment district business. My father did. He never complained and worked his entire life. In his middle 80s, when he was mentally and physically unable to work any longer, he died. Hard work, integrity, duty to family and country, these were the values my father and his generation cherished. Today, as you start on your life adventure, remember the values of this earlier generation. You will never feel fulfilled by just building material careers. You must also nourish your own emotional and spiritual needs by creating homes and communities based on these values of sacrifice, love, and giving to others. From the prophet Jeremiah, chapter 29. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord. And from the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, there is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to uproot. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to tear down, and a time to build. A time to weep, and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones, and a time to gather them. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain. A time to search, and a time to give up. A time to keep, and a time to throw away. A time to tear, and a time to lament. A time to be silent, and a time to speak. A time to love, and a time to hate. A time for war, and a time for peace. Be happy, do good while you live, be a source of pride to those who care for you, and share your blessings with the world.
grew up in Arlington and is a distinguished graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy, class of 1969, with a triple major in astronautics, mathematics, and engineering science. He earned his Master's of Science degree in Aeronautics and Astronautics from Purdue University. He started his Air Force career as an F-4 pilot. In 1972, he flew 177 combat missions in Southeast Asia. Then he became an F-4 instructor. From 1975 to 1980, he won top honors as a test pilot instructor, and a test squadron operations officer. He was selected to become an astronaut by NASA, and during the next 11 years, he flew on the orbiter Atlantis, piloted the orbiter Columbia, and worked in many areas of the space shuttle and space station development and support. In 1991, he left NASA to return to the Air Force as commandant of the U.S. Air Force Test Pilot School at Edwards Air Force Base. In 1992, he retired from the Air Force and returned to NASA as program director of the joint U.S. and Russian shuttle Mir program. From 1995 to 1998, he worked with the Federal Aviation Administration as director of the William J. Hughes Technical Center and became associate administrator for regulation certification, leading the safety regulation and oversight of aircraft operators and manufacturers. In September 1998, he left government service to speak full-time to young people across the country. During his career as combat pilot, test pilot, flying instructor, and astronaut, he has won many top honors and service medals, including the Air Force Legion of Merit, Defense Distinguished Service Medal, and three Air Force Distinguished Flying Crosses. Please welcome a man of integrity, a man of honor, and a man of God, Colonel Guy Gardner.
What I'd like you to do to start out this afternoon is I want you to imagine something. I want you to imagine that you're dressed in this very bulky pressure suit. Just to make you very fashionable, we're going to make it day-glow orange. And this is kind of hot, it's uncomfortable, it's very heavy. And you've got a helmet on your head as well. Now we're going to take you and put you in your seats, and we're going to strap you in very tightly. Also, between you and the seat, by the way, is a parachute and a little survival kit as well. The seat is lying on its back because the chair is fastened to the floor, which happens to be vertical now. So you're lying on your back, in your pressure suit, on top of your parachute, on top of your chair, strapped in very tightly. Now we're going to take your chair, and we're going to bolt it down to 4 million pounds of high explosives. And then we light the fuse. And that's about what it's like to graduate from high school. It is an exciting time, and it's an exciting ride that you are about to embark on in your lives. Of course, that's also what it's like to launch in the space shuttle, if you have that opportunity in your life. How many of you would like to be astronauts when you grow up? Well, let me rephrase it. How many would you like to fly in space someday? All right, we got a few hands there. Okay, now how many of you know somebody you'd like to send to space? I'm getting some hands from the parents back there too. Well, today what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about what it's like to fly in space and share some of the great opportunities that I've had to do that, and talk a little bit about how that might relate to your lives as you grow up, no matter what it is you might do. I don't expect very many of you to actually be astronauts. I actually hope the space program is such in the next 20, 30 years that any of you would have the opportunity to fly in space who just wanted to buy a ticket to do that. I hope we develop that program that well and that far. Well, what it's like to fly in space is really impossible to describe. You know, a lot of astronauts, when they would come back, they would kind of be badmouthed by the press a little bit because they really couldn't describe what it's like to fly in space. Now, most of us are engineers or science backgrounds and not from the humanities, so we haven't been trained to explain ourselves very clearly, certainly not in picturesque terms. But I think the real reason that we can't explain what it's like is unexplainable. The human language, any human language, just does not have the words to fully describe what it's like to fly in space. Today I'd like to use, however, 4 words to summarize at least the feelings that I experienced of what it's like to fly in space. And the first word is exciting. It is exciting to ride a rocket into space. To strap yourselves down to 4 million pounds of high explosives and have someone light the fuse and experience that tremendous blast off and heading up into space is an incredibly exciting ride. How many of you like to ride roller coasters? Raise your hands. All right. Yeah, I love to ride roller coasters. When I was a kid growing up here in Alexandria, I graduated, by the way, from George Washington High School. It was a high school back then. It's now a middle school in Alexandria. That was before we had T.C. Williams. But they used to have a couple of amusement parks right here in the local area, over at Marshall Hall, which was down across from Mount Vernon, across the river there in Maryland, and then over in Glen Echo Park. And we used to go ride the roller coasters anytime we could. A lot of fun. Well, after my first space shuttle flight, we took the family on vacation and went to some amusement parks, went to Disneyland, and Disney World, and took the kids on roller coaster rides. They were fairly young at the time. We had a blast, but I tell you what, it just wasn't the same for me. I actually found myself rather than being thrilled and excited with the roller coaster rides, I was acting like a test pilot again, analyzing the design of the roller coaster, why they do this and that, rather than just being thrilled, because it is an incredible experience. You're pushed back into your seat, there's a lot of shaking, a lot of vibration, a lot of noise, and the G pressures of the acceleration of the space shuttle as it blasts off. Right, liftoff is about 1.5 Gs, or 1.5 times the force of gravity, and then it quickly accelerates so to 3 Gs, 3 times the force of gravity, so you're pushed back into your seat, 3 times your normal weight. A little difficult to breathe. You actually feel the weight of the suit and the harness on your chest, but you can still move your arms around. I can still operate any switches I might need to operate, or use the keyboard for my computers if I need to. But it is really a thrill. Incredibly exciting to ride a rocket into space. The second thing that comes to my mind right away when it's like to fly in space is what it's like to be weightless up in space. It is fun. It is a blast. Be weightless. I'm sure you've all seen in the videotapes that we bring back from space, the astronauts kind of flipping and tumbling around. Imagine yourself for just a minute as you're sitting here, that suddenly we're all weightless. And we can go floating up. It'd be a lot easier to change the light bulbs up here if you're weightless. However, it would also be very hard to keep the congregation settled down in their chairs, because they and the chairs and the books and everything else, the papers, the microphone would also all be floating around, having fun as well. But it is just a blast to be able to be weightless in space. One of the fun things I liked to do when I was up in space was get up and get a little tiny ball up in one corner down in the middeck, the lower part. There's a little more room up there in the space shuttle. And close my eyes and then take my hand and just push as hard as I can off from the wall. And then go tumbling and bouncing around inside the middeck. And then open my eyes and try to figure out where I was. Because you could be up in the corner in the ceiling, upside down when you open your eyes, and you gotta adjust and figure out where that is, or down on the floor, or just about anywhere. It's a lot of fun. We also play with our food a lot. It's a lot of fun. You're throwing the popcorn up, catching your mouth, or you can throw all kinds of food and float them all over the place and gobble them up and have that kind of fun. Bill Shepard is a friend of one of the people I was talking to here earlier this morning. He flew with me on my first flight. He was a Navy SEAL. What we did with Shep is we got him dressed up. We found some goggles there in our one of our repair kits, and got some plastic sheets we take to his feet to look like flippers, and some hoses from our oxygen system, and we made a little thing look like a tank on his back to make him look like a scuba diver. And then we took the little fish crackers, the Pepperidge Farm fish crackers, and we floated them all over in the middeck, and had chefs swimming through there gobbling up fish crackers. Made great film footage, but when we got back, we found out we had left the film out of the camera, so we didn't really film it. But it is a lot of fun to fly in space. The third thing I want to talk about is it's meaningful to fly in space. We can't go up in space and spend all those tax dollars from the parents in the back there, and from some of you as well who work, just having excitement and fun. We have to do good work while we're up there, and we want to do good work while we're up there. Now, my first space shuttle mission was a classified mission, so I can't tell you what we did. Actually, I could tell you, but then I'd have to shoot you, so I won't tell you. We did deploy a satellite, and they did declassify that for the Department of Defense. My second flight, but it was meaningful. You just have to trust me. My second flight was an astronomy mission, and we carried several different kinds of telescopes, actually an X-ray telescope and 3 different kinds of ultraviolet telescopes up, operating them in the shuttle's cargo bay, around the clock, 24 hours a day for about 9 days, and then brought those instruments back. Those are things that I do. Obviously, all the other different shuttle missions do other things. But it's also meaningful to go up there and do work to advance science in the field of both metallurgy and medicine, to deploy satellites that we use in our everyday lives down here, and all the other variety of things that we do in space of a meaningful nature. The fourth word I use to describe what it's like to be in space is, what is it like to look down at our planet, the planet Earth, from 200 or 300 miles up in orbit around the Earth? And the only word that comes to my mind, or the first word that comes to my mind, is awesome. It is just an awesome experience to look down at God's creation from that perspective. You might need to imagine for just a second. You're going around the Earth now at 17,500 miles an hour. That's your what we call orbital velocity. That's how fast you got to be going to keep coming back and hitting the Earth as you go around it. That's about 5 miles every second. Now, it seems very fast. Visually, as you look out the window, though, since you're a couple hundred miles up, although you're going that fast, that the angular rate that the ground is going by below is very similar to what it looks like looking out of a passenger airliner up at about 35,000 feet, going at about 0.7 or 0.8 times the speed of sound, instead of 25 times the speed of sound. So angularly, the motion-wise, it's about the same. Those who've been over to the IMAX theater at the Air and Space Museum, that gives you a pretty good feel for what that feeling looks like. But instead of, like in a commercial aircraft, where you're looking down at towns going by below, and the shuttle you're looking by at countries and continents going by below. We go across the United States in about 10 minutes. As you're looking out the horizon, you can see the horizon is about 2,000 miles out away from it. As you go, so you see this, you're not so far away that the Earth is this little blue ball in space, like you see from the pictures of the astronauts that went to the moon and back. But it still has this curvature. You can see the curvature, and it's a beautiful experience. On my first flight, we had a very busy first day. Matter of fact, we had delayed our launch for about 2.5 hours for the weather, and you actually strapped in about 2.5 to 3 hours before your scheduled launch time. Then we had a very long day deploying our satellite. And so finally, it was time for bed. Now, my first flight, the commander, Luke Gibson, and I, we floated up above our seats up on the flight deck. Just kind of loosely fasten the seatbelt around you so you don't go drifting off bumping into things during the night. But the neat thing about it, and we said we did that in case of emergency happened, we're right there at your computer so you can take care of things. But also, you get to look out the window while you're going off to sleep. Of course, you can sleep anywhere you want to in space. You're weightless, so you just relax, close your eyes, and go to sleep. We do take sleeping bags up, so you climb into those and hook them somewhere. It gives you that feeling of the sheets at home and the bed underneath you, so you're a little more at home. And it also keeps you from bumping into things. Well, as we were going off to sleep, I was floating there above my seat, looking out the window. The space shuttle, when you're up in space, there's no air, so you can point whichever direction you want to point as you're going around the Earth. You don't have to have the pointy end pointed into the wind like you do in an airplane. And we happened to be in an attitude where our nose was pointed down at the Earth. And we were, as I got into my seat, we were traveling over equatorial Africa, kind of headed up to the northeast across Africa. I'm looking down, thinking about all the people that live down there in the jungles and the actually very harsh terrain, parts of equatorial Africa. And then 20 minutes later, we're up over the snow-covered mountains of Siberia in western Russia. This is in early December. I'm thinking about totally different living conditions for the people down below us now. 20 minutes later, we're over the South Pacific, looking down at the atolls in the South Pacific, beautiful South Pacific islands. And it is an awesome experience. At the same time, I was listening to some tapes. Now, we can take up with us our own set of tapes to listen